so much, Tom, for that wonderful introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm Lori McWright, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Seamless Care Models Group within the CMS Innovation Center. And my group is responsible for a broad set of integrated care delivery models focused on increasing value in accountable care and direct contracting organizations and primary care practices. In addition, another set of our models looks to improve access to care for beneficiaries with kidney disease. And finally, we provide opportunities for health plans to innovate in the Medicare drug and health plan space. Together, along with the other CMS Innovation Center models, we focus on improving quality of care for beneficiaries we serve while reducing program costs. I would like to also thank Gary, Carol, and their colleagues for inviting me here today. And of course, thank everyone in attendance for their time and the opportunity to update you on our progress in implementing the VBID hospice benefit component, and also known as the MA Hospice Carve-In, which many of you know we've been working hard to implement and will begin in January. Now, I'm very excited to share where we are today and in important elements of our implementation process. I think important takeaways from me today are threefold. One, we stand ready to support you now if you're in an area of the country where there is a Medicare Advantage plan that is located near you. We have been working day and night in the last year to be ready to help, starting with the hospice technical document to the website materials posted on the CMMI portion of the web, to letters that you will be receiving if you are in one of those model participating MAO service areas. And in those letters, there will be a checklist that I'm holding up now. And that will contain a breakdown of 5 steps to be ready for you to bill and receive payment from the local Medicare Advantage organizations that are participating in the model. If you are not in an area of the country that has one of the value-based insurance design hospice component plans, I ask you to imagine the possibilities out there for your organization. What could you imagine doing if you had a business partner that was interested in building out hospice care for your Medicare Advantage enrollees and making the system work better? That could mean providing palliative care sooner, or maybe more care, or perhaps offering concurrent care as an option when it's clinically appropriate. At its base, the model is there to allow for creative partnerships and business arrangements between you as hospice providers and your local plans. If not now, I encourage you to be open to the possibilities. And if you're in an area with a participating plan, I encourage you to have conversations with those plans about the possibilities that could work for you. For today, I am here to answer questions that you all may have and make sure that you're aware of how hard we are working to make sure that hospice providers in impacted areas are ready for the beginning of the model in January. Now, to start my update, I wanted to share a little bit about model participants. We have 9 Medicare Advantage organizations who will begin to test the hospice benefit component in select parts of the country in 13 states and Puerto Rico. And while not a huge footprint, we're actually really pleased with the response to our applications, or to our response to our request for applications for the initial year, as we have representation in each region of the country and a mix of both urban and rural areas. And we have larger and smaller plans involved as well. And we continue to believe that this represents a really exciting opportunity for CMS, participating organizations, hospice, and participating MAOs and hospices, and particularly for you all as the providers to innovate, adjust as needed, and learn and grow together with us. Now, in pockets of these 13 states and Puerto Rico, there does exist this great opportunity for novel business relationships, and not just for hospice care. I encourage you to also think about the possibilities of upstream palliative or supportive care, and also to be thinking about the opportunity that that gives you to coordinate and improve the quality of care for the beneficiaries who are enrolled in participating MA plans and those who may eventually elect hospice. And I really want to hone in on that concept of partnership for a minute, because at the end of the day, CMS plans and you, as our Medicare certified hospice providers, we all want to drive better and higher value care for our beneficiaries. And in order to do that, we need to be good business partners to each other. I view that as a critical component of the success of this model. So I asked you to think about, what does a good partnership look like? How can you be a good partner to your local MAOs, and how can they in turn be a good partner to you? And most importantly, how can CMS also be a good partner? And when I think of what it means to be a good partner, it starts with that we provide information as we're developing models, and we make sure that that information is timely, we regularly communicate, and that we provide technical support and predictability of what we're going to do. So in other words, when we say we're going to do something, we do it. And that's my and our commitment to you all, that as our business partners, that we will make sure that we do timely communicate, and that if you have questions or concerns that something isn't working the way we said it should, that you let us know. You know, we will firmly commit that we'll make sure to investigate any concerns that you have, and that we will provide timely feedback. So, what about the plans as our business partners? Well, as our contractors, we expect that they not only communicate with us regularly, but that they also communicate with you as hospice providers in their local areas. At this point, you should know I have met with all 9 participating plans, and they have heard clearly from me my expectations that they contact all local hospices in their areas, and that they help you all understand at a minimum the options for contracting, what kind of creative partnerships would they envision, and their process for billing and payment arrangements. There should be no surprises here. I have reminded them that they are now going to be the payers for hospice providers in their local areas. And that comes with the responsibility for communicating the process for billing and payment simply and clearly. And I've told them that I'll be watching, and that if I hear of a concern, I'll be calling. So, in closing, we've certainly come a long way since we first announced the model component nearly 2 years ago. You know, we started out by partnering in a different way, by engaging with you all and and other key stakeholders about the model design, recognizing to meet our goals of improving hospice care and quality that we needed to hear from everyone involved in the process. And we did just that. And now we're in this critical stage of the model implementation where we are trying to support model participants and you local hospice providers to be able to partner and prepare for January 1st. And we're frankly thrilled to be at this point. To put it mildly, there's been a lot thrown at everyone this year. But my belief, we've come out stronger, and certainly with the recognition that there is no better time to learn about hospice care and test important new concepts within the hospice model, and particularly with a focus on how to better support and coordinate care for our most vulnerable beneficiaries at a very sad time in their lives. So, with that, I would like to encourage that we create this space for innovation and collaboration, which does begin with being good business partners to each other. And I want you to let you know that I am very serious about this, in that I fully expect to hear from you all and from plans about how CMS can do better. And I would do the same in making suggestions, areas for improvement. So, with that, I will continue to do my part for communicating today. And I would look forward to chatting with Gary Bacher, who I believe is going to join me, and happy to answer any questions that you all have. Thank you for your time.
Great. Lori, thank you so much for that terrific presentation and discussion. It's so great to have you. And thank you and the whole team really for all the work. I know and appreciate just how much it takes to put through these demonstrations, to coordinate and clear all of its aspects really across the executive branch. And I think it's just tremendous, as you've said, just how far the team has come in terms of the work. So we really appreciate it. And we really appreciate your making the time today and your emphasis on being good business partners and the communication. So first and foremost, I really just wanted to thank you for that, and really thank your team on behalf of MPHI. I think you were saying this, but just kind of taking a step back, for the first year, it sounds like you're very comfortable with the participation, and you were mentioning kind of that it's well-rounded across a number of different states, large and small plans. What are you thinking in terms of, and what would you want the hospices to sort of understand in terms of any potential expectations you have for a year or two in terms of additional MAOs joining or expansion of the service areas, by existing MAOs? Just any thoughts that you could share with folks?
Yeah, sure. That's a great way to start out. I think perhaps if we just think about the different perspectives from the various stakeholders. When we think about new model participants or expansions of current participants, thinking about the beneficiaries that we are serving, they've begun their healthcare journey by enrolling in a Medicare Advantage plan at some point, and typically that's when they're healthy, and they've developed relationships with care providers. They've become used to that model of care, and I think beneficiaries also have come to expect and enjoy the supplemental benefits that are provided by the Medicare Advantage organizations. And so I think as life turns and our beneficiaries who are enrolled in MAOs become sick, I think that there's all kinds of opportunities for MAOs to provide a unique set of services through their supplemental benefits. And we've gotten lots of questions from MAOs who are either VBID participants or not, about the model. If you think about, those who are participants this year, by definition, they are looking for partnerships, and they want to innovate with organizations that are also looking for opportunities to be creative and collaborate. And so, with that, I would expect, in general, from the questions that we've received, and the possibilities for creative business arrangements out there, that we would see an uptick in enrollment. I think certainly, we're in applications, and time will tell. But I think the other piece is that our strategy of sharing information with the current participants and impacted hospices for this year, we'd also envision that that information is being used by others, and the amount of people that are joining our webinars or office hours would indicate that there's definitely lots of interest.
Thank you. Thanks, Lori. And a question that we get a lot, if I'm a hospice organization and I'd like to participate, and for instance, for this year, and I look and I see that I am actually in a service area that one of the MAOs has a plan that's participating, and I've reached out, but I'm not hearing back. Kind of any thoughts on what I should do? And thinking down the road, is that the kind of thing that you'd like to hear if hospices are having trouble getting in touch with MA plans, and maybe emphasizing a little bit more of the kinds of assistance that CMMI is thinking it can provide hospice organizations and plans, both now and over the course of the demonstration?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I love that question right off the bat, because I want to know if hospice providers are not hearing back. That's of concern. As good business partners, that would be a base expectation of mine. I mean, the VBID mailbox, VBID at cms.hhs or .cms.hhs.gov would be a base, or contact me. I think in the biggest picture, we had these onboarding sessions with the plans, and we asked them each one about their outreach strategy. How were they going to go about contacting local hospice providers? And frankly, I expected that, we might be having to do a little nudging, a little sort of suggestions, and pretty much by and large, I was gratified to hear that all of them had plans to outreach, had been thoughtful about the types of local hospice providers, understanding, their sort of catchment area was a real, it was very thoughtful for the most part, what we heard. And I didn't make any notes, need to follow up, for example, in thinking about that there were plans I was concerned about in that regard. In terms of the education, to me, the education really started with our RFA, as you might recall, last December. When we published that was really the beginning of the education. And then, we really spent the better part of this past year fielding questions, thinking about how we would want to communicate the details of the model, and how it would actually work, kind of boots on the ground. And so the hospice technical document that we published at the end of September, my view about that is it's really like a roadmap, I suppose, for the kind of how-to for current participants and hospice providers, and also those considering opportunities in the future. And then kind of what can you expect in the future We had actually an office hour today, well attended, many great questions. We're very methodical, as you might recall, and my team keeps me honest, and they spent hours combing over all the webinar questions we got last week, and we answered all of those important questions this week that were the most frequently asked. There's some we need to do a little research on, but for the most part, we got to all the ones that were clearly gaps in people's knowledge. And interesting, there's some hospice providers that are starting with less information generally about the Medicare Advantage program. So we're answering some really basic questions, and then we're answering some more sophisticated questions around billing and payment operations. And as I described, we're going to be sending letters to all of the local hospices in the MAO service areas, and that'll include that checklist that will hopefully structure a hospice provider's preparations and kind of this is what you need to know, and around eligibility, checking eligibility of their hospice enrollees, and making sure that they're having the conversations with their local MAOs. So, my expectation is that there's no surprises, that we basically have a situation where all the plans have communicated with the local hospice providers, and that everybody's in a situation where there's either a contracting relationship or at a minimum that folks know how to bill and they know how they're going to get paid. And then, we can talk about the future, but that's probably plenty, in terms of, but have some thoughts about, what it would look like in the during the model as well, because we don't envision going away. We envision monitoring and making sure that we provide the kind of technical assistance that makes sense during the model, as opposed to getting folks ready.
Great, appreciate that. And speaking of the future, one thing I'd be a little bit remiss, I know it's going to be on folks' minds, so any thoughts you can share. Obviously, we just had an election. There'll be a second administration coming in. New members of Congress have been elected going into Congress. Just any perspective you can share on whether you would see any change in direction in the demonstration based on what you know. I'm sure folks are just always thinking about all the stuff they're reading in the news at this point.
No, that's a good and expected question at this time, and I think, from my vantage point, I think as long as we are communicating our process and our readiness for the model, and making sure that we're able to answer questions, that I could imagine that we will be given, we will enjoy the support we have from the current administration, and that we would also enjoy that support from any new administration, because frankly, the healthcare issues that face us all, I think now more than ever important to test the hospice component, Carve-In into MA, to make sure that we understand how it works, and what are creative possibilities there for updating the hospice benefit. And certainly there have been concerns about timeline in the past, but from my vantage point, we're ready to go, we're locked and loaded, and I can't imagine that that a new leadership team would want to make changes, as long as they feel confident that we can deliver on the model.
That's great. Thank you for that. And maybe kind of moving into a few of the technical areas. I think you were mentioning before, some of the things that certainly we view as exciting potential developments, innovation in terms of payment arrangements between hospice organizations and MAOs, the ability, as you said, to potentially offer upstream palliative care, offer concurrent care services on a transitional basis, additional supplemental benefits that hospices can provide, all potential benefits of participating in the demonstration. One of the other things that hospices are often asking as they think about, does it make sense for us to join a network, is they're trying to understand, well, is there prior authorization, is there utilization management in the way that a health plan would maybe traditionally do things, particularly in an HMO. And the technical guidance, I think, goes to great lengths to explain that there's not prior authorization and there's not utilization management, but there is the ability for MAOs to engage in program integrity activities. Could you maybe just share some thinking for folks and what's the balance that's being sought in the demonstration, and for hospice organizations that wouldn't be as familiar with the language, what they can expect based on how you're trying to strike the balance in the demonstration?
Yeah, that's great, Gary. Thank you for asking that question, because I think that's really important for hospice organizations to really understand that piece of it. And I think going in, we wanted to make sure that we were basically building off of what is done today, but to make sure that there's a distinction where there is no prior authorization or utilization management allowed for the hospice services. But that there's important information to be learned, in the context of I guess what I'd say is like stepping back and looking at trends, practices, in the aggregate, that might be useful for hospices to understand, as well as MAOs. And so, the concept of a pre or post payment review really is from a how are we doing, not from a should you offer a particular service to an individual. And so the sort of balance we struck, is to basically mimic what is happening in Max today and how they approach reviews, and but to be clear that that's limited, and that the concept of the utilization management, PA, would not be permitted for the hospice services.
Great, thank you very much. Another policy issue that came up, and I think came up in the webinar that was given maybe last week, thinking about concepts of network adequacy. So for hospice organizations that are thinking about, if I would like to participate, whether it's now or in the future, how do I think about what the plan would need to think about from a network adequacy perspective? So what's going to constitute an adequate network into the future? And for hospices, maybe to think about understanding, remembering that there's these different phases of the model. But I think you mentioned on the webinar, it's in the near term that you're beginning to think through the network adequacy question and potentially seeking some input and information. Can you just share with the hospice organizations thinking in terms of what's sort of the balance that you're thinking about and the kinds of information that you're hoping to learn and hear?
Yeah, no, thank you, Gary. I mean, that's an important piece to make sure at the starting gate here that folks are aware of how we're thinking about it. And I think the best way to maybe address it at this point is to say that that we really anticipate finding that balance between continuing to make sure that beneficiaries at their most vulnerable have access to high quality palliative and hospice care, but understanding that there's a variety of contracting strategies, of creative arrangements that could be used to get at that care, and that the point of this model is to allow for experimentation. And initially we wanted to put in some guardrails to get started that would, would make sure that we could get our sea legs, and that hospice orgs could as well with the participating plans. But I think we will be very deliberative. Think about the process that we use to get where we are today, and that we spent well over a year talking to all the stakeholders regarding the policies in the model. And so we would contemplate that same kind of strategy, where we would look for a variety of opportunities to gather feedback from hospice organizations, from plans, from consumer advocates, formally, informally, and that we get, this is a big deal. But at the same time, we feel like, and as we noticed in the beginning of the policy development, that we feel like this is an important sort of step to take, but we want to be very thoughtful in gathering the feedback and finding that balance of innovation and creativity, but with some structure and criteria in terms of networks that make sense.
I appreciate that. And I think folks will appreciate kind of the inclusive nature of the process that you, I think, are describing, that you anticipate going through. As you said, being an important issue. And sorry if this is, getting a little weedy, but hopefully it'll be helpful for folks that are kind of, watching and paying attention. One other area that might be not as familiar to hospice organizations would be the Medicare Advantage organization appeals and grievance process. Just kind of any thoughts as a starting point that you could provide, just for hospices to understand how should they think about what the appeals and grievance process means, especially considering what we were just talking about before, since there is no prior authorization or utilization management. What would be the way that you'd encourage hospice organizations to think about the purpose of the appeals and grievance process in the context of the demonstration?
Oh, yeah, excellent. Thank you, Gary. I mean, in a really bottom line way, to me, I mean, the purpose is beneficiary protection, and ensuring that that there's good communication and rationale for decisions that are made. Perhaps maybe an important distinction would be, a grievance is filed anytime there's a beneficiary who has a concern that they have expressed. They have the right to file a grievance, and those grievances are required to be addressed on an expedited basis. And an appeal is related to a coverage determination or decision that's made by a plan, that that could be pre or post payment, potentially, but again, that given the nature of the hospice care, we would expect that be handled on an expedited basis as well. And, that could potentially be filed on behalf of a beneficiary by a caregiver, or even a hospice provider. I think we don't envision that there will be, large numbers of these, but I think, that those sort of guardrails and protections are there for a reason, and want to make sure that that we will be tracking those from a monitoring perspective, and looking for any sort of patterns or concerns there as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Another question, a little bit on the technical side, and then I promise we'll bring it back up. So the hospice organizations, obviously very familiar with kind of the concept of related and unrelated care, and I think they're, aware that CMS has made clear that it's expected that there's, even in fee-for-service hospice, that it's rare that there really should be care that there's care that's unrelated to the terminal condition, but obviously there is sometimes. And the difference, I think, in terms of the fee-for-service world versus one in the demonstration is in the fee-for-service world, it's really Medicare fee-for-service that's liable for the unrelated costs. In the Medicare Advantage world, it's going to be the plan that's ultimately liable for those unrelated costs. And for that reason, I think it was clear in the guidance in terms of how things that hospices should be aware of. So if there is unrelated care, so care that's unrelated to the terminal condition, if, for instance, we're talking about a non-networked hospice or even a contracted hospice, helping the hospices understand that, for instance, the plan's rules would apply since it's not really hospice care. Could you maybe unpackage that a little bit for hospice organizations and what they'd want to make sure that they're helping beneficiaries understand so there's no surprises from a beneficiary standpoint?
Yeah, it's funny that you use that term, no surprises, because as you were talking, I was just thinking, well, the main thing I want to say is that what we can encourage is no surprises, on billing and payment. But this is in some ways the same animal, but it's maybe a different side of it. I think what we're encouraging the MAOs to do is just like with the Max, to basically validate what is considered related to the terminal illness and related treatment. So it's clear what would be included as a part of the hospice payment and what is not. And I think that a sort of important piece here is that if it's unrelated care, the plan rules apply. And I think that's where the beneficiary protection and the kind of working together hospice organizations and plans, in my mind, are really duty bound to make that connection, and where a hospice provider would believe something not related to the terminal illness care, to communicate that and validate with the MAO the status, and that the MAO respond quickly, etc. And that way that the beneficiary would be well aware of the what is covered under different rules of either the hospice benefit or the MA plan coverage rules.
Thank you. And I think we're going to turn to questions from the chat soon. Other questions for you would just be anything that we haven't talked about so far that you want to make sure that the hospice organizations kind of are aware of, or just that you hope they would do in terms of how they work with the Medicare Advantage organizations. Just any thoughts on that regard that you haven't had a chance to express so far?
That's a really good question. I think mostly, I would just reiterate that of how clear I've tried to be with our contractors, the MAOs, and my expectation of their outreach to hospice organizations. But I'd also say that, reaching out if you have questions, if you need clarification, I would strongly encourage doing that sooner rather than later. I mean, it's not January 1st isn't tomorrow, but it's, pretty soon, relatively speaking, with the holidays, etc. And hospice elections only become relevant for the model as of January 1st. So but that time, as I say, will come quickly. And so I would just encourage a dialogue to begin, and make clear how you're supposed to bill. If you're an in-network provider, they will be specific rules of engagement that plan should be providing you as a part of the contract. And if you're an out-of-network provider, then you should probably as much or more understand the rules of engagement for billing and payment. And that's where, again, I've tried to be really clear with the plans that this role of being a payer to hospice providers, I take really seriously for them, and they need to as well. And and so that to me would be the most important pieces. And again, if you're having trouble contacting the right people, please contact us. We have made every effort to make that information transparent. There's you will get that information in a letter about the local plans and points of contact. It is up on our website, and a list of contacts for different purposes. But if for any reason that doesn't work, please reach out, because that would be the worst outcome of all, is that it's February and you have a patient who turns out is in the model, and you have not had a conversation. So I would encourage that, to avoid that sort of situation.
So Lori, well, thank you again so much for all the time and the dedication to this model. It really is pioneering. It hasn't been done before, and so we all really appreciate the work and the effort that you've all been putting into it, and the dedication to the effort that you're bringing and the care with which I think you're going about it. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of communication and dialogue, but we really appreciate your coming and spending some time, and we also appreciate very much the efforts of your whole team. And if we can be helpful in any way, please let us know, and we'll look forward to having a chance to answer some questions with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I want to say for the record, I absolutely have appreciated the partnership and the relationship with MPHI. You guys have been critical to helping us formulate our thoughts, and making sure that we didn't go sideways. And so really appreciate from Tom and everyone else your guidance and your thoughts along the way.
Great, terrific. Thank you again. Thanks so much.
Sure.
Thank you.